Hello, everyone, and welcome. And thank you for coming to our session on accessibility. My name is Michelle Rivera-Span, and I'm a Senior Marketing Manager at Taylor & Francis. I oversee the library team for North America. You'll see listed here are contributors who all have different areas of expertise and hope to bring different perspectives to this conversation. But we are also very much hoping to hear from you, the librarians. Here's today's agenda. After a quick... Oh, so I'll turn it over, sorry, to you guys.
Just brief introduction of everyone else.
I apologize. Because don't call me.
I will start. My name is Tina Carrata. Oh, okay. Do I need one?
I don't know.
Can everyone hear us?
My mother tells me to speak loud
If you're
naturally.
doing a presentation on accessibility, please use the mics.
Oh, there you go. That's very
We're
good.
using them anyway, but for accessibility reasons.
There you go. That's an excellent point. That's exactly why we're here.
Yeah.
That's the feedback we want.
Exactly why we're here. My name is Tina Corrado, and I am the Regional Manager for West and Midwest states in the United States. The reason why I'm here is because I was introduced, rightfully so, thankfully, about the accessibility issues when I attended the BTAA conference that focused solely on accessibility, and came away with a lot of really key points and then also a lot more questions that I am thankful to be able to bring back to Taylor & Francis. So the reason why I wanted to sit on this panel is hopefully have a discussion, because I am sales and customer facing when I come out to visit the libraries. What can I do? How can I be better prepared to inform you of the advances that we're making when we make them?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth O'Connell, and I'm Product Manager for the Taverner Francis Journal platform, TNF Online. And my interest is, of course, to do with making the platform accessible. And very much look forward to hearing from you also, from your perspective, how the platform accessibility is perceived and how your researchers use it in that respect.
Hello, my name is Jamie Janchak. I work in the Boca Raton office at Taylor & Francis, and I'm the Production Technologies Manager. My central role as that position is to take industry standards and best practices and integrate them into not only the technology we use to produce the books, but also our workflows as well. I sit on the Taylor & Francis Accessibility Committee. I co-chair the technology work group for accessibility, and I serve as the production accessibility champion.
And I am Allie Jacobs. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager on the journal side for the Libraries and Institutions team. And I oversee the Americas, Europe, Middle East, Africa, and probably missing some. Thank you guys for joining us. This is an intimate group today, if you couldn't tell, so I appreciate everybody making the long trek from whatever prior hotel you may have been at to join us in this room. So I will pass it back to Michelle now.
So here's today's agenda, and after a quick intro and a brief statement on accessibility at TNF, we'll highlight today's objectives and leave some time for questions at the end. We'll also be asking those of you with smart devices to engage in some interactive polling that we'll be doing throughout the session. For those without a smart device, you can still weigh in on the poll results as we go through them. Members of TNF attended BTAA Library Conference this year, and this really prompted us to start a conversation nationally with librarians about accessibility. Our goals for this session are to have an open conversation, both librarian to publisher, as well as librarian to librarian, to talk to each other about the accessibility issues we're all facing. And I will now turn it over to Ellen.
So given the vast amount of topics that fall under accessibility, we've narrowed today's forum objectives down to 3 primary areas. As Michelle said, we'll be asking an introductory poll question to kick off each objective, and then we'll open it up further for questions and conversation. There is a microphone that we can pass around that's sitting right up here with this young lady. So please just raise your hand and she'll pass it to you as we go through all of these. Before we get started, I want to say just a few brief updates from Taylor and Francis. So at Taylor and Francis, we are committed to ensuring all of our products and websites are accessible to as wide an audience as possible. As part of our commitment to compliance, Taylor and Francis has begun to trial alt text creation for several of our key products. We've also just introduced a new text to audio feature for all journal content called Read Speaker. Additionally, we've formed a cross-departmental team which aims to understand and improve on various accessibility issues throughout the business, including ebook enhancements, VPAT license availability, customer access to content, ancillary content upgrades, and more. Some members of our session up here are part of that group, and we are hoping to bring home some of that feedback that we hear today to the larger team. If you have any additional questions about accessibility at Taylor and Francis, please come and see any one of us after the session. We are now going to kick off with our first poll question. So you will see here. Simply type in the URL, slido.com, and enter the event code and click join. And actually the event code has changed, I believe, because there was some popularity with the word accessibility. What is the new event code? Chelsea, if you could just say it into the mic.
Okay, it's capital T, capital F, capital C, capital H, 19. So if you go to slido.com and you type in TFCH19
and click join, you should see the first poll question come up. I'll read it out loud while we await. So on a scale of 1 to 5, least important to most important, where does accessibility rank when making an institutional purchasing decision?
Can I just ask, was everyone that has a smartphone able to get the poll? Is it showing up for you?
It's not showing up.
Yeah, it's not showing up for me either.
All right, well, we're going to make this super easy then, because there's only 4 librarians in the room. Let's not overcomplicate it, shall we? So I'm going to ask some questions here. We're going to go a little bit off the cuff. So for those of you that would place yourself in a 4 or 5, we'll say, is anybody feeling comfortable that their institution falls within that range?
In terms of importance.
Yeah, in terms of importance, exactly. So my question to you is not to put you on the spot. So how has prioritizing accessibility been beneficial to your institution? And if you want to list any specific ways, that would be great.
So I think maybe for myself, I might be different from people in this room. I'm from Ontario, and we have some compliance that we have for January 2020, and there aren't really a lot of guidelines around that compliance. It's a little bit different from the American compliance, and so it's really important because we have to be compliant. So that's the reason, and I really can't speak because I'm a collections person. I don't deal with the public as much. So I can't speak to the effect because I'm not interacting with individuals who have requested accessibility accommodation.
Great, thank you for that. I believe the gentleman behind you.
Hi, my name is Anaya. I'm with Southern New Hampshire University. Accessibility is incredibly important to me, and if I were the one making the purchasing decisions, this might be a slightly different conversation. But I do think that while accessibility is incredibly important, I think when we're talking about purchasing, our subject content is like, we buy things that aren't, or we have licenses that aren't 100% accessible because we need that content or we need that subject coverage. So it's not the only thing I'm thinking about, even though I would rate it as a 4 or a 5, and it's very important. And this started before I started it as an issue, so I won't take responsibility for it. But we do ask our vendors to sign EIT agreements. So that's part of our negotiation, and that's part of our increased efforts at accessibility and trying to, even if a product isn't, or the content in a platform isn't accessible 100% right away, we're trying to identify workflows for remediating that content and starting a dialogue with our vendors so that we have a way to get that content to an accessible state for our users. We also, for our instructional designers, they are looking for accessibility as they're building courses and including learning resources and library resources into those courses. So we're starting to look at it earlier than when students with a documented need are trying to and failing to access content that is inaccessible. So we're a couple of steps looking at it.
Excellent. Are you building accessibility language into your licenses with vendors at this point?
Yeah, that's part of the EIT.
The EIT, yeah.
Electronic Information Technology Agreement. I don't know, something with those letters.
Yes, you're correct. Wonderful. For the other librarians in the room, if you were to place yourself somewhere on there, I don't want to put anyone on the spot. If you feel like you were somewhere in the 1 to 2 range and felt like offering up an opinion about that, we would love to hear it.
Yeah, kind of in the middle.
Even better, there you go.
Just because we don't actively go out and look for accessibility. We're just purchasing them, but we know that it's important to the student body because there are students that go to where I work that have disabilities. Right now I'm in a consortial group and we're exploring how, like trying to make a list of all the vendors that have accessible content, and I think that's where we're at right now.
Yeah,
And that's,
I can see how that would put you right in the middle. And right up here.
Whilst I put myself at a 4 or 5 for the importance, unfortunately, I come from a very, very small private institution, so we don't necessarily have the level of oversight that would, I guess, be an impetus to make sure that everything is accessible. When I came on, as someone who relies on screen reader and who does have physical limitations, we realized how inaccessible our stuff was, and it very quickly became my job to get everything in line. But one of the things that I found is that particularly with, I want to say subject content librarians, there's a certain amount of, not intentional, but a certain amount of ignorance that kind of comes with the territory where a lot of accessibility terminology and a lot of accessibility, even tool sets aren't even really known to subject librarians. So while I would say for myself, I'd put it at a 5, institutionally it's been difficult to get it probably above a 2 or a 3.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and you've kind of touched on a point that we're going to hit on later around training for staff. So thank you very much for that. And Tina, I believe, has something she'd like to. Tina, there's that
there's a
link on there if you want to
microphone.
use that one. So.
It's my switch.
Is it on? We need to turn it on.
I just wanted to,
There we go. I'm sorry. I just wanted to come back to the example given from your example about the additional agreement. I've had situations, again, because customer-facing and visiting institutions, where I've been asked to change the existing ebooks license in this case to include accessibility language in the license. And I just had a quick question for you. Your agreement would be separate from that, I take it? Is it a drawn-up document that you would request separately from the vendors, or would you ask that that language be incorporated to an existing?
So I'm not the point person on those contracts to the best of my understanding.
Okay.
If my electronic resources library has a spy somewhere.
No, I understand.
But my understanding is that, primarily we have sort of our vendor contracts, and then instead of inserting accessibility language into that contract, we have our established electronic information technology addendum that we ask vendors to sign in addition to that.
Okay.
What normally ends up happening is the vendor says like, well, we want to work with you, but, and then they redline significant portions of that EIT, and then we come back and we're like, well, that's actually not going to work, at least this, and hopefully we find something workable in there. So that stock EIT isn't always the signed version that ends up in the end contract.
Understood, yes.
But it is something that we come to the table with, is we have our established language. So it's fundamentally similar.
Exactly, okay, that's very good to know. I just wanted to know if there was, if we will get to the point, hopefully, where all that back and forth and editing and crossing out doesn't have to occur as much, but it's good to know that that's out there, and it has already happened with me where we've changed the language in our existing. You're going to purchase this collection of ebooks or these journals, so we're going to add this on, and I hope to continue to see that develop, so that's great. Thank you.
just want to add that we've seen it both ways in our institution. For the larger consortia deals, they're actually just adding a HPA model license. And then if it's individual things that we're doing our own, we're gonna have another option.
That's another reason why I'm very glad that I am here, because I do want to go back and send that message to, be on the lookout for that it is now, accessibility needs to be considered as well as just copyright and all that. This is something rightfully so needs to come to the forefront, so it's good to know. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't know if anyone's institution, but I know at the PTA has started to supply their institutions with I don't want to say stock phrasing, but essentially, here's the first iteration of what we expect from this vendor, and if that doesn't work, this is where you go next. Basically, that red line coming back, but they're providing their institutions with a guide almost. So I'm sure that we're going to see more of that coming. So thank you everybody for that, and that will actually easily help us segue into our first set of objectives. So the first question on here, how do you evaluate accessibility for current and potential products? Again, we can keep this very conversational. If any of these bullets up here jump out at you that you'd like to address, they all kind of fall under the same umbrella, which makes it very nice for conversation. And so just kind of perusing the rest of the questions here, what is the single most important accessibility issue facing libraries? And lastly, has your library created an accessibility liaison role at your institution? And we see varying degrees of this. Obviously, I think it's somewhat of a newer role that's being created. And from our perspective, we more or less want to know, does this liaison work with faculty and students? Is that somebody that we as a publisher can work with at your institution? So I'm going to open it up again to the floor. And feel free, like I said, to kind of contribute to whatever you'd like. I know we've all probably got a couple of things to say about this.
Well, I have I guess, how do you evaluate accessibility for your products? I don't even know how to start. Like, is there a document that you go in and that says that you're accessible? And
She's asking how would you even begin?
Oh, right, that's what you're saying, yes. Yeah, so I know that some institutions have put in place kind of a workflow around it to establish kind of the levels of compliance that a vendor may bring to them. So we're more or less just curious. It is a big question. I will definitely give you that. But it's certainly not something that we're 100% on the ball with. And so I guess really anything that you think might be worthwhile to comment about this, we're completely open.
yeah, because I feel like I'm not equipped to go into your product and say, well, this is this is accessible or not. I feel like I can't even call.
So on that front, I can tell you how we are assessing our products, and maybe it would help. There are a few things. So first of all, we have the BPACT form. You might be familiar with it, which is the voluntary product accessibility template, which is publicly available, so you immediately can see how we rate ourselves essentially. And now I'm speaking for the German platform specifically, we actually did an audit, an accessibility audit in June, and we use specific tools that rate the accessibility against the W3C accessibility guidelines. And so those are official guidelines and there are tools that can be used to rate against those guidelines and give you a rating A, AA, and so forth. So we undertook this audit in June, and on the basis of the audit, we are now undergoing 3 phases of improvements to reach the AA compliancy level. So that's another way you can assess. But I understand your point of view, the product is ours and we need to publicly declare, how accessible it is, so we need to follow those guidelines to evaluate accessibility. Oh, and sorry, I just finished by saying that we also had the Michigan State University doing a completely independent accessibility evaluation of our platform, which
I'm sorry, Michigan State? or-
Michigan State,
there you
yeah,
go.
sorry, Michigan State. And they, of their own initiative, did that and provided us with the results, which we also take into consideration, comparing them to our results, which are very similar in actual fact, because they use the same tools and the same W3C accessibility guidelines as evaluating guidelines. And so we are taking those in consideration in our improvements, 3 phases improvements I was referring to.
So the librarians I've spoken to about accessibility in Ontario, which is where I'm from, they're all in the same boat, but she's expressed that we have these compliance regulations, and we've all said, but I don't have the expertise to do this. And so, really curious to know what tools you used to assess against the WCAG, because that's one of the things I'm keeping an eye open for at this conference, are the tools to get us there.
Again, sorry, I can tell you what tools we've used.
Yes.
And they are publicly available tools, so they're free tools. So we used Chrome development tools.
Sorry?
Chrome development tools, called Lighthouse in particular. And AXA plugin for Chrome again.
What was it?
AXA,
AXA?
yes, AXA. They are all technical tools that are available.
They're all new to me.
Yeah, I'm sure. They're new to me too.
I'm here.
That's right. And another plugin, Wave.
Yeah.
And these are the main ones we've used. And some manual checking inevitably, but these are the 3 main tools used.
Wave is the one that I've heard of before. When you were talking a few minutes ago about your self-accessibility audits and then also Michigan State's, is that just the platform? Is that content? Is that both? Can you speak to that
Very
one?
good question, because it's important to make the distinction, I agree. So the accessibility audit was done for the platform specifically. However, I believe that the Michigan State one was including some content samples, so it's a bit of a mixture. From our perspective, yes, we need to differentiate because there are certain things we can do with the platform, but we are also undertaking steps to tackle the content, especially PDFs, and how to make PDF as accessible as possible. But we have to consider that there is a lot of legacy content that retrospectively won't be possible to adjust. But going forward, we have guidelines for Typesetter to address accessibility as much as possible at PDF level. We are also looking at introducing new format, the EPUB format, which is already in itself a lot more accessible. So it's an important distinction, I agree, and the majority of the audit relates to the platform, but the content comes into equation as well, inevitably.
Yeah, it's all right if they can find it, if they can't read it, right?
Yes, and for the content itself, I work with the content more than the platform, certainly. And we have also gone through and done a review of how inaccessible a lot of our content is, especially the PDFs and the back list of content. And earlier this year, we rewrote our entire book guidelines for all of our vendors and added a lot of accessibility material to it with specific instructions of how they were to grade it and what we expected of them. So certainly going forward, we're trying to move to EPUBs as quickly as possible, and even for the PDFs, we've added a lot more requirements of vendors as to reading order, tagging, and alternative text. So we are definitely trying to get there.
I'm very excited to hear that. In those guidelines, is there a point in the future where you'll only contract with people who meet those accessibility guidelines? Is there some kind of impetus or what's the word I'm looking for? Incentive. That's exactly what I meant. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, we run a typical cycle with our vendors, and conveniently we're just at the tip of our cycle now. So we just passed these out last month, and have gotten the first round of feedback, and we're implementing any of the changes that we need there or clarifications. And then as of January 1st, it's what we demand from our vendors.
So just point of clarification, so it's for the authors that you're part of the publishing process, you're getting this?
This is our third-party typesetters, ebook providers, and things like that. We have started a pilot project with our authors to work on the alternative text because we've determined that, frankly, they are the best subject matter experts to approach the creation of alternative text or long descriptions if those are needed, because we go across both science and humanities materials, so we have a wide swath of things to consider. But that project's just in its first phase, so we will see how well it works.
And is that covering books and journals?
Yes, and on the journal side, I can tell you that also with the authors, we request that when they submit video abstracts, they also need to submit the transcripts. That's one first step.
So I had a few questions, and it was mostly about the kind of, with evaluating accessibility, are you guys looking to partner with any other companies that have technologies in place that allow them to be able to scan and tag content using artificial intelligence? I'm thinking JSTOR, I'm thinking the Internet Archives, to be able to even work with them to modify those tools to be able to do auto tagging, do things that would make PDFs more accessible. I mean, I can tell you PDFs are the bane of my existence when it comes to just trying to read anything, because oftentimes there's no CR, there's no direct accessibility, so I need to either OCR it myself, which is great if there's not a DRM block on it, but I can't OCR it. And to that end as well, with books that are being developed, moving towards an EPUB desirable format, how strictly are you enforcing any XML guidelines if they're using XML to develop the book? I guess how is that going to tie into any older materials? Are you going to try to do any kind of reverse parsing to pull them into more standardized XML?
So for the, I don't know where to start with this one.
Sorry.
It's fine. EPUBs, we do recognize the limitation of EPUBs, and certainly going forward, all new content, and for our science content going back about the last decade, all of the PDFs were always live text, no OCR involved, so they were digital first effectively, and they should work. The last 6 to 7 years, we had to mandate that only Unicode fonts be used, so that should eliminate any ASCII font issues. That wasn't always followed by vendors, and we are still pushing that as the absolute requirement. For backlinks, well, we'll go to EPUBs. For the EPUBs, some of our vendors do build them off the XML files, some build them off application files, some do something in between. We use the Daisy Ace, the EPUB checker from W3, and we also have an internal program that we wrote to help go through the verification grading process to make sure things are working or appear structurally consistent. There's alt text where there should be alt text and things like that. So this will probably, as the vendors get accustomed to it, we're expecting about a 3 to 6 months shakeout period once vendors realize they have to follow these rules, and then things should be going a lot better. We've already taken into account alternative text going into our XML, so it's actually in the archives. Any kind of material is resourced that would travel with it and go out to the format. And yeah, as for backlist content, I know that they're a separate division. I do know that they are looking at rebuilding the EPUBs completely every time we do corrections on older content and then issue it forward as a new printing. So that has started the process, and they've actually been involved in a lot of our negotiation with vendors to make sure that they're capable of doing that.
Great, thanks. So So does anybody have anything else they'd like to add to this set of objectives?
Wonderful, wonderful.
In a session this morning, there's a publisher who mentioned that kind of the old way of processing a book maybe took 1 to 2 hours. And when they go through the new accessibility, it takes more like 7 hours, 6 to 7 hours. So I'm just curious, like what your thoughts are on that and the cost, you know, because there's going to be cost, terrible, like a considerable cost, I would think, involved in the impact that would have on your program.
It depends on the book entirely. So a standard humanities, social science book, there shouldn't be that much impact. We at Taylor & Francis take it from, we have to do it right at the beginning of the process, not at the end of the process. And if you do it right at the beginning, structure it properly, make sure your author is using tags, and it gives a semantic meaning throughout the content. It makes it a lot easier to get a good way to being accessible. And then you just add in the extras like the alt text. We always harp on alt text, but it is probably the hardest part of the whole process. For more complex books, yes, it can get a bit more burdensome, but technology does have a way of eliminating those burdens. And we've definitely looked at, like you had said, some machine learning to try to come up with auto-tagging solutions. Those didn't work greatly, but we've had to experiment with that, with machine learning, cognitive services used to create alternative tags, descriptions, things like that. So we're constantly poking at technology to see what it can solve for us. 2 to 6 hours, I would say that type of shift might mean the publisher is just starting up accessibility and still stumbling their way through a few things, or they're using PDFs. So PDFs are not fun. They do take longer.
So I think this now leads us to our second poll question. That's not a question right now, but on a scale of 1 to 5, how satisfied are library users with the accessibility resources offered at your institution? So I guess we'll see by show of hands who here puts themselves in a 4 to 5, and so like what is it that your institution offers that is so well received?
Based on satisfaction, that you
Yeah.
find that your library patrons are more satisfied with what's offered.
I have a hard time quantifying this is on a number scale, but I can speak to that.
Sure.
So I'm not a part of our accessibility center. We do have an online accessibility center at SNHU. We also have an on-campus accessibility center. My understanding is that, well, I love both of those departments. They both do incredibly good work. So I hope that our students are satisfied with those departments. The library is doing some of that work in a peripheral capacity. Our instructional designers, as they're building classes for the online environment, are coming to us as e-learning librarians and saying, we want to use this library resource, it's not accessible, now what? Through that interaction, we've had some incredibly long wait times for when we needed material or we're doing it ourselves. So I'm not satisfied with that process, and I can tell you that my instructional designers aren't either. So it definitely depends on what piece of this we're talking about. We've also seen, there's one student, I'm not remembering whose presentation this was on, but she actually tweeted specifically about her experience with accessibility at SNHU, and they had 2 tweets, kind of a before and an after. And so eventually she got to a place where she was more satisfied, but the earlier of the 2 was saying, like, basically this question, why is it so difficult for, like, why do I even have to register with an office to get what I need? Like, I should just be able to click the link and be able to do this. And we're seeing, the legal precedent is more and more aligned with that kind of thinking, that information needs to be available at the same time or before for the students that use a screen reader or have other disabilities. So I know that's not a 1 to 5 answer, but
That's totally fine. There's no rules anymore here. You brought up a good point, actually. You said the legal precedent is starting to shift some of that. Might you be referring to the LACCD? Yes.
In the, and there's a new, and I'm not gonna remember what it is, but there's that, which is very, very recent, and then there's also new guidelines. I think it's an addendum to the ACA, but I could be misquoting that, but it's specifically referring to the accessibility of content in platforms in addition to the platforms themselves. So both of those things.
Thank you. So we can toggle over then to our next set of objectives. And did I hear how much time we have left? The time went quicker than we thought it would, as it always does. But we were off to a bit of a late
Yeah, I
start.
think we started off about 5 minutes late,
Yeah.
so I think
We'll wait till someone kicks us out. So this is our next set of our next objective. Michelle, if you want to take it away.
Sure. This brings us to our second objective, promoting accessible resources. And we want to touch on, is there an optimal and preferred way to promote accessibility resources to library patrons? What are library patrons requesting in terms of accessibility? And also what options are available to library staff to learn more about accessible reading options for patrons?
I'm in a situation where our office is separate from the library, and it's, at the moment, it's, the work's done by a technician who basically just does some ebook service, and it's not a very broad mandate, so it's going to change. One of the things that I thought about how we're going to do this and pull this off by January, and one of the things that I thought might be useful was to have, within most of our platforms, there's always a, feedback form or something like that. I'm not sure how the librarians feel about this, but if there was an option, like a button for accessibility that we could customize with whatever email we want to have attached to it. But if a patron's on a website and they can't get what they need, there's like a point of service right there that they could, rather than having to seek out the accessibility, because a lot of them will not, they need to know where the accessibility office is, and just, it's like one other step, but it's right there in the interface. I'm not sure what.
Makes a lot of sense.
So now I'm going to talk about another vendor in your panel, sorry. But we've been working with EBSCO on a product that I think it's still in beta. I don't think they've been advertising it a lot, but within our EDS multi-search, is what we call it, platform, right next to the full text button, there's an option where students can say, I need an accessible version of this format, and then it goes to, we get a copy of the email and we get a copy of EBSCO's response, but it goes through their workflow to provide an accessible version of that content, and then it goes directly to the student. So it is not perfect, but we're really happy to see that kind of responses from them, and the fact that it's in the platform right next to where those other full text options are is really heartening.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know how. Okay.
Well, actually, they were in the previous session that we were doing, and they did mention that it hasn't been launched yet, but they are working on that, so it did come up earlier, so. Well, they love to pilot. No, that's good, and so was a partner, so that's fine.
And I don't know how many of you were in the session earlier with lyricists and MSU, but Heidi Schroeder said a really great thing, which was don't let perfection impede progress, basically. So I think that's kind of the theme of accessibility at this current stage for everybody.
Does anybody else have any other comments or anything you want to add? Anybody on the panel or?
Kind of building off of what you just said, what you were referencing earlier, when it comes to ways of promoting accessibility resources, so many people think, oh, if we don't have it perfect, then we just can't put anything out there. And I think it's really important for us who are advocating for accessibility to encourage people that any progress is progress. If something is even slightly more accessible than it was before, that's a great move. And it becomes a snowball effect. I mean, my research is in accessibility and mostly in evaluating libraries' accessibility of their websites and their resources that go out. And, kind of branching in to see how they're interfacing with different vendors and how that affects the way that patrons are able to access materials. And I found that so many libraries in general just don't do it because they don't think they can do it well enough. But one of the things that I found is maybe even, and this is something that I do for my own company, which I'm not going to bring up, but one of the things that we do when it comes to accessibility, we actually let our customers know these are the steps that we're taking to make things accessible. And we actually link out to the tools. So a lot of times librarians, what we'll do is we'll go to a website and we'll try to see how, what the accessibility aspects are. But a lot of times, as some people don't know what the tools are. So if you guys are using tools, especially ones that are open and free to be able to be used, maybe putting that in your accessibility statement and linking that out. Just that way you're not only promoting accessibility within your own actions, but you're also providing tools for us to be able to use to evaluate our own stuff and make sure that we're all kind of bringing things into congruence.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. I am cognizant of time, so I'm going to ditch whatever slides we have left and open it up to anything that you feel like we should take away that you would like to say to us before we part.
I've seen James taking tons of notes, so.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've given us a tremendous amount of feedback, and I think I can speak for everybody here from Taylor and Francis that we could not be more thankful for the feedback you provided us. It really was very beneficial to us, to be honest. At this point, if there's any other final things that anyone would like to say, otherwise, please feel free to approach literally anybody in this room, because it's probably a Taylor and Francis person, about any questions you might have, or if you'd like to follow up on anything else afterwards. And again, I appreciate you making the journey out to this hotel, to this floor for this session. Thank you, everyone.